You guys are all set to start when you're ready.
Should be good to go, Andreas.
Andreas, you're muted. You're muted.
There we go. Sorry,
Yeah.
I thought. All right, good evening. Welcome to the Conservation Commission special meeting for May 11th, 2021. The call to order. Ms. Gibbons, please call the roll.
Ben Ancona III,
Here.
John Bashand,
Here.
John Casasanta,
Here.
Bernadette Conway,
Present.
Richard Lavarier, Alan Paskowitz, Andrea Sadil,
Here.
Max Turgeon, Jeff Wagner.
Here.
Okay, just for clarity, I did not hear Secretary Lavarier's online. I did not hear his name on the roll call.
I called his name. I did not hear what he said.
He did not
All right.
respond.
Okay. I thought I saw Mr. Paskowitz. You're muted, Alan. Are you here?
I am here.
Thank you, Alan.
You're welcome.
Okay, so
So you will have to see someone for Commissioner Lavier.
point of order then, I will see Bernadette Conway. She's the only alternate available for Commissioner Laurier.
Correct.
And also point of order, if we need to vote, I will have Mr. Wagner, Vice Chairman, to step in as Secretary in case there is a vote this evening. As point of order.
Okay.
I accept.
All right,
Commissioner
thank you.
Wagner.
Thank you. All right. Moving on to item 3, public hearings. 3A application number 2021-09-MA for an inland wetland and watercourse map amendment at 3333 Berlin Turnpike. The applicant is HJG-PC Newington Investor LLC. Owner is the Rocky Hill Realty Company. Agent contact is BL Companies. So I will first open it on the phone. Is there anybody from the public who wishes to speak? I have a few questions. I'm going to throw it to the commissioners if they have any more questions relative to the map amendment. And then we'll go back to to anyone online from the public who wishes to comment. So
Andreas, would you like the applicant to make any presentation at this point? And then
if they have
field
one,
questions?
yes.
Okay.
Okay. Well, good evening, Mr. Chairman, members of the commission, Mr. Hinckley, Ms. Bertotti, and Madam Clerk. For the record, my name is Chris Smith. I am a land use attorney with the law firm of Alter and Pearson, and I appear before you this evening on behalf of the applicant concerning two different applications relative to the same property, 3333 Berlin Turnpike. The two applications involve separate public hearings, and the applications consist of, the first one is a petition to amend the wetlands map of the town of Newington, and that's the subject of this public hearing. And the second application, which will be the subject of the next public hearing, concerns an application seeking approval of regulated activities associated with a proposed mixed-use development of the subject property, again known as 3333 Berlin Turnpike. At the outset, Mr. Chairman, I'd like to introduce the members of the team who are here this evening. On behalf of the applicant, we actually have two parties, Grossman Development Group and Criterion Development Partners. On behalf of the Grossman Development Group, we have Mr. Howard Grossman, who is the president and managing principal. We have Jamie Anderson, who is the senior project manager. On behalf of Criterion Development Partners, we have Jack Englert, who is the executive vice president and principal. We have from the BL companies, Michelle Carlson, who is Director of Land Development, and Dennis Godier, who is the Senior Project Manager, and who we'll be hearing from shortly concerning the petition to amend your wetlands map. We have Eric Davison of Davison Environmental LLC, who is a professional soil scientist, as well as a professional wetland scientist. And we also have Daniel Gorman, who is a licensed environmental professional of Whitestone Associates, Inc. in attendance. Can I have the next slide, please? Thank you. Just quickly, Grossman Development Group has over 4 decades of development experience and is responsible. Mr. Grossman is responsible for the management and oversight of the strategic planning for GDG and over 40 years of commercial real estate experience. This will be more relevant for the next application, Mr. Chairman. And then the next slide, please. Criterion Development has quite a few years, 7 decades of experience with developing multifamily communities, and they've permitted over 5,000 multifamily units over the years with a total project investment of $1.18 billion. But again, we're here for a petition for this first public hearing of to amend your wetlands map. And here is the subject property. It's again, 3333 Berlin Turnpike. There's a locational map up in the top right-hand corner. The star at the bottom in the southern part does represent the site. And you'll see that the site comprises almost 25 acres and is located not only at fronts to the Berlin Turnpike, but also has access to Payne Road. And with the permission of the chair, what I'd like to do at this point is turn the presentation over to our professional soil scientist and wetland scientist, Mr. Eric Davison, who will walk you through the wetlands on the site and what he found relative to his investigation that resulted in this petition to amend your wetlands map. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Please proceed.
Hi, can everyone hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay. My name is Eric Davison. I'm a registered soil scientist and professional wetland scientist. So let me just walk you through the wetland delineation work. I know we had covered some of this at the initial hearing. Mr. Chairman, you had asked some rather detailed questions about some of the delineation methods. So I can just summarize those again, if that makes sense. Basically, there are 2 wetlands and 2 intermittent water courses on the property. The wetlands meet the technical definition of wetlands because they have wetland soils. The water courses do not have wetland soils, but they meet the state water course definition, which is any feature that has a defined channel and bank, followed by 2 additional characteristics out of a list that includes things like evidence of flow after a storm event or wetland vegetation or scour and things like that. So 2 water courses meeting the water course definition and 2 wetlands meeting the wetland definition. And just to avoid any confusion, within wetland 2, which is in the southwest corner of the property, there is also a water course that's embedded in the wetland, and it flows out of the wetland and into the culvert where it's indicated on the map, and then drains into the city stormwater system and off site. But because that water course is embedded in the wetland is the defining characteristic, and therefore that's the boundary that's delineated. So we don't delineate the actual water courses interior to the wetlands. In terms of soil types, there's I submitted my soil report, which describes the soil types present on the site. Most of the soils in the wetlands are disturbed or manipulated soils just from former disturbance. And those would be qualified as aquants. And then the native soil types that were present in wetland 2 again are listed in my report. I won't go through the soil types, but in terms of the delineation work, it's basically just walking along the wetland boundary, digging auger pits by hand every 20 to 40 feet and setting a flag at every point where the wetland makes a turn. And that's what you see on the mapping is each vertices is a flag point that defines the wetland boundary. I don't know if this is sort of map amendment, but then of course I need to describe the wetlands for the actual application. I don't know if you want me to just jump right into that or if I should hold and field any questions about the delineation before we get into the actual characteristics of the wetlands. If that's how you want to handle it, I'll just touch on the map that's in front of you.
Well, let's talk
which
about the
is-
characteristics of the wetlands, if you may.
Okay, sure. So if you just go back, guys, to the map before, let me just walk through the description of the wetlands. Okay, so starting in the northeast corner is Wetland 1. Wetland 1 starts off-site to the north. There's a big broad slope that lies behind those adjacent developments, and the wetland sort of develops on that hillside. It drains down to the south onto the site. And historically, Wetland 1 probably flowed through the site, but with all of the history of development and site disturbance, what happened was basically a large diversion trench and drainage swale was constructed at the base of Wetland 1 to capture the water and carry the flow to the west. And that is where the water enters into what we're calling watercourse 1. So the water flows down the hill where it's captured into a channel, flows west, and then into watercourse 1. Watercourse 1 is a completely defined watercourse, defined by mechanical means. It's got a formed bank, a trapezoidal shape, and the entire bank and slopes and base of the channel are all riprap. So at that point, you lose the wetland features and it just becomes a watercourse, which is essentially just a flow conveyance feature. So the water flows west through watercourse 1 and into a culvert inlet where on the map, you can see yellow there being circled. That's the culvert inlet. And then that flow is underground. It flows to the southwest where it discharges where we note there in yellow. It discharges into Wetland 2. So that's the flow of Wetland 1 and Watercourse 1. It flows from the northeast corner into the watercourse, into a pipe, and out into Wetland 2. Let me just move on to Watercourse 2. Watercourse 2 is in the northwest corner of the property, and it originates from a settling pond or detention basin that's off-site to the north. And if you look at the air photo that is in front of you, if you look just between the label culvert inlet and the label Watercourse 2, you can see sort of an egg-shaped brown feature. That's the settling pond or detention pond that's in that offsite development. That's basically the source of that Watercourse 2. Again, it's just a defined drainage channel. It's completely man-made. It flows onto the site, then takes that angle bend to the west and enters into a culvert. And that one also flows underground and discharges again to that point we noted before in the northeast corner of Wetland 2. So that's Watercourse 2. There's no wetland associated. It's essentially just a dug ditch. Its sole function is to convey flow from that offsite pond when it overflows into that Wetland 2. I don't think it flows often. I had not seen any flow in it on any of my visits, just some scour and some saturation. So my guess is it's just flowing during peak storm events. So it doesn't have a base flow. It's truly just a conveyance feature.
Relative to excuse me, may I ask a quick question, Mr. Davis?
Sure.
So relative to Wetland 1 and Wetland 2, does Wetland 1 ever hold any water? Just basically just run off down in Wetland 1? There's nothing that is just seasonal. How is the water level in that wetland? Both of my question for both.
Sure. Yeah, Wetland 1 is on a slope, so it's what we call a hillside groundwater slope wetland. Because it's got sloping topography, it never develops standing water. The water just flows basically saturated through the upper soil surface and down the slope. So it's just sheet flow runoff. It's too steep for any standing water to develop. And Wetland 2 is basically the same thing. It has a larger watershed and has more water in it. but overall the wetland's sloping, and then it becomes a defined channelized flow in the southern end of the wetland. So that's got some stream flow to it. And there, I've got some photos in my report and also here in the presentation slides I can just quickly run through to show you what I'm talking about. So wetland 2 is the more natural undisturbed wetland on the site. There's some encroachment from invasive species from the offsite area to the northwest where you have sort of a patch of Phragmites. And then there's the manipulation to create the culvert outlets in the northeast corner where the watercourse 1 and wetland 1 discharge. So that's been altered obviously to create a discharge point. And then this southern area along the access drive, that's all, at that point, the wetland just becomes entirely channelized. And it's just a channelized straight line, channelized stream. So that whole southern area is completely manipulated along the access drive. So that's sort of the run of the wetlands. In terms of vegetation, wetland 1 is mostly forested. Wetland 2 is mostly forested, but both have some open canopy areas. And then I can just quickly show you the photos just to orient you if you'd like.
Did you see
just jump
type of
ahead?
species habitat in there? Is there anything?
Yeah. In my report, I list all the vegetation that was observed. In terms of wetland wildlife, you're in a very urbanized environment, and the wetlands they just have saturated hydrology as opposed to seasonal flooding, which is what you'd need for most wetland dependent species to breed. So the wetland wildlife is pretty marginal just because they're disturbed wetlands in an urbanized area and they don't have seasonal flooding. This is watercourse 1 just to show you it's pretty densely vegetated now, but if you look, you can see the riprap on the far slope and on the base of the slope, and then in the foreground in the bottom left of the photo you can see how the riprap carries all the way over to the other side of the slope. So it's a big trapezoidal channelized watercourse. You can go to the next photo. This is wetland. This is where wetland 1 confluences with watercourse 1. So you can see again, pretty disturbed. There's a fence running through the wetland, and we're looking upslope. So if you look beyond the fence, you can sort of see some red vegetation. That's some silky dogwood, and then you can see the Phragmites. And so the wetland basically flows right down the slope through that fence and then gets captured right into the channel. So that riprap in the foreground of the photo is the start of watercourse 1. That's where the water basically gets captured and gets carried off to the watercourse 1. You can go to the next photo. This is just another view of wetland 1 looking northeast. Again, you can see it's sort of a mixture of forest and shrub with some Phragmites. And in the bottom left of the photo, you can sort of see the beginnings of watercourse 1 with that riprap there in gray, the gray riprap you can see there. You can go to the next photo. Here's one more shot of wetland 1. Again, this is sort of stepping back. You can see there's some old silt fence there, so showing some previous disturbance limit, I think maybe associated with the building removal. But again, you're looking up slope, you can sort of see that degraded fence, and then you can see the Phragmites and that's the wetland in the distance. So this is watercourse 2. I'm basically standing down in the watercourse. It's about 3 feet wide at the top, 2 feet wide at the bottom. Again, you can see it was riprap lined at one point. This photo I captured here was about the maximum flow that I've seen in it. I kind of climbed around until I could find a spot that had a little bit of flow in it. But this is about it. Again, it doesn't carry a lot of flow. You can go to the next photo. This is wetland 2. This is the northern section of wetland 2. I'm looking north. You can see that encroachment of Phragmites in the open area of the wetland. This is where it transitions to more of a mature forest. And then right in the foreground, you can see it's relatively undisturbed wetland. This is the point at which a watercourse develops, and that's what you're seeing in the foreground. That standing water is basically where the flow becomes concentrated and a watercourse develops and starts to flow south. You can go to the next. Here's just another shot of wetland 2. And this kind of shows you what I meant by it's on a slope, so it only has saturated hydrology. So you can see in the foreground, that's basically the limit of what you get for ponding, just that, like, quarter inch, half inch of standing water, because this is on a gradual slope. So the water just kind of sheet flows through the wetland and into that water course. You can go to the next. And now this is the southern end of Wetland 2. This is where it becomes a defined channelized stream. It's sort of hard to tell just because the vegetation is so dense, but I'm standing down in the stream channel. Off to my right, outside of the photo, would be the edge of the access road. But this is basically just a showing that the stream is just channelized, but it's got, best I can tell, perennial flow. So I think that's all the photos. Oh, okay. Yeah, this is just an example of the bordering. There's a small band of forest that borders Wetland 2. It's really the only undisturbed mature forest that's on the site. I just wanted to kind of show that. It's probably only an acre or so, but this is the only sort of small patch of undisturbed forest that borders Wetland 2. The rest of the site is pretty well disturbed, and there are no real mature trees. This is just another shot of that little patch of undisturbed forest. I think that's it, right? I think that's all the photos. So that's sort of a description of the wetlands. I don't know if you want to, I can field some questions, probably a good point for that if you have any.
Commissioner Paskowitz.
Yes, looking at the 10 photos, they're very well defined and indicating forest land and phragmites and vegetation, skunk cabbage and such. Can you put a relationship to each photo onto the wetland regulated activity application map that I received yesterday of the site that's going to be developed in the areas that are going to be changed?
Oh, the areas that are going to be impacted.
Yes.
Yeah. Oh, you know what? Yeah, that I can, if you want, I can just walk you through. I can show you the photos of the areas that will be impacted.
Can I interrupt for 1 minute? Just, Andreas, I don't know if you just want to try and keep this to the map amendment right now.
Yes,
I
I
know it's
prefer to
kinda
have
tough.
that at the second public hearing, if that's okay, Commissioner Paskowitz. I want to, is there
As
any
long-
questions as far as the
That's fine
mapping?
with me. No, that's fine. We'll follow up.
I do have a few questions myself, but I guess the first part, is there any questions relative to the marking of the wetland soils and the demarcation of the wetland right now? Is there any question for Mr. Davison in that regard and to the applicant as far as what his work that he has done, and has he defined to your satisfaction the current state of the property?
Yes, I have a question. Looking back at the photos, are there any maps, are there any flags that we can see on any of these photos?
Flags of the wetland,
Correct.
flagging itself.
Mhm.
No, I don't think I have any flags in the photos. I was trying to, what I'm trying to convey in the photos is sort of what the interior character of the wetland is. Sometimes if you stand on the edge and shoot past the flag, it doesn't really capture what you're trying to convey in terms of what the characteristics of the wetlands are. So I didn't photograph from the edge of the wetland. I kind of like to photograph more on the interior.
Okay.
Just for informational purposes, Alan, the wetland map amendment plan shows the flag wetlands, and you got that not yesterday, but for the prior meeting, so you should have that.
Yeah, in
Well,
terms of the wetland
I've
boundaries,
been
just to
following
clarify,
it.
the boundaries of the wetlands on the property are pretty well defined, just because, that's what you get when you have a historically disturbed site. Usually the fill ends at the wetland edge, so it's a pretty clear demarcation if you walk the site of where the wetlands start and stop.
It's a lot easier for me to comprehend on a larger level when you actually see the photo and where the margins are and where flags may have been placed. But I'll take your discussion on that, and look forward to the next portion of my question at the next stage. Thank you.
Is there anyone on the phone at this point? Just a second. Is there anyone on from the public who wishes to comment? And I'll get back to you, Mr. Commissioner Bashan. Is anyone on the phone who wishes to question the applicant?
I see two attendees, but neither has raised their hand to my knowledge.
Commissioner Bashan, please proceed.
A question for the applicant. What is the net change in the wetlands? Do we know, and do we have a number? It may be on the map and I don't see it, but I think we talked about it last week that some of the areas weren't changed very much at all. In area, let's say.
Yeah, sorry. go
So
ahead.
the map that I have up shows in the white line is what has been adopted with the town map. So you can see the different areas, and then the blue has been is the field delineated wetlands, which are the flag locations that Mr. Davidson had flagged and that we had picked up from our surveyor. So you can see the town map had identified roughly 3.5 acres of wetlands. Field delineated is a little bit over 2.5 acres. And then you can see how that equates to the upland regulated area.
For the record, Ms. Gibbons, that was Mr. Dennis.
Sorry,
Goddard.
yeah, Dennis Godare from BL Companies, I apologize.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thanks, Dennis.
Thank you.
So approximately 1 acre of wetland is being taken out.
Yes, it's a reduction, correct.
Okay.
Commissioner Wagner here.
Proceed.
I walked the property because if you go behind the furniture area, the water course or where it comes off the northeast side, it is riprap and it's definitely defined with the markers you did. And I was satisfied with where the wetland, what looked like wetland and it started with the mapping he did with the flags. He did a good job with that, I believe.
Thank you. Anyone else from the commission who wants their hand up?
Another question, Mr. Chairman, if no one else is, if no one else.
Commissioner
has
Bashan.
The wetlands, and just tell me if this is a fair summary of it. Everything to the north is industrial property. So these retention basins are basically the runoff from these industrial sites. If you look at an aerial view, you have quite industrialized properties there. Are these wetlands, as far as their viability goes, do you think there'd be amphibian breeding in there? Do you think there's vernal pools there?
No, yeah, it's Eric Davison, for the record. No, that's sort of what I was getting at when I was talking about the hydrology. So vernal pools only occur in what we call seasonally flooded hydrology, and those are wetlands that occur basically on flat ground. You have to, if you have anything over like a 3% slope, you're not going to have a seasonally flooded hydrology, and that basically means you have standing water for typically more than 3 months, and that's what's required for vernal pools. None of these wetlands have seasonally flooded hydrology because they're on a slope. It's just their natural characteristics. So these are not the kind of wetlands where you have amphibian breeding developing. So.
Thank you.
Hey, anyone of the commissioners wishes to speak? All right, Mr. Hinckley, is there anyone on the phone from the public wishes to speak?
There are 3 attendees. I do not see anybody with their hands up.
All right. I have no further questions. Thank you, Mr. Davison. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, Chris Smith, for the record, that does conclude our presentation relative to the petition to amend the wetlands map of the town of Newington, and we respectfully submit that based on Mr. Davison's field delineation and his testimony. And as a professional soil scientist, as well as a professional wetland scientist, which, as you're aware, the soil scientist and ecologist is required to perform this work and review for the commission under your regulations, we would respectfully request that the commission consider approving this map amendment as proposed. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, going forward right now, you can close this public hearing and then you can act on it under old business later.
Yes, I'm aware. Thank you. I was just going to say, do I have a motion to close the public hearing for application 2021-09 map amendment?
I'll make the motion to move it to old business.
Commissioner Wagner seconds it.
I'll say the motion is to close the public hearing. Application 2021-09 map amendment and move to old business, moved by Commissioner Bashan, seconded by Commissioner Wagner. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Are we gonna take a roll? Excuse me, are we gonna take a roll, Ms. Gibbons?
Yes.
All right, please proceed.
Commissioner Ancona,
Here.
Commissioner
Yes,
Bashan?
It's a yes or no.
Back to Mr. Ancona.
Commissioner
Well, I'm
Ancona,
sorry,
yes
yes.
or no?
I didn't hear you. Yes.
Commissioner Bashan?
Yes.
Commissioner Casasanta?
Yes.
Commissioner Conway?
Yes.
Commissioner Paskowitz?
Yes.
Chairman Sadoo?
Yes,
Commissioner Wagner?
Yes.
7 yes.
okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
So moving on to public hearing B, application number 2021-11 for construction activities in the inland wetland and watercourse area, regulated area at 3333 Berlin Turnpike. Applicant HJG-PC Newington Investor LLC, owner the Rocky Road Realty Company, agent contact BL Companies. I will ask the applicant if they have another presentation for the public.
Yes, we do, Mr. Chairman.
Please proceed.
Thank you very much. Again, for the record, my name is Chris Smith, and I appear before the commission representing the applicant concerning this application, which is the subject of the second public hearing. And this application involves a request for permission to conduct certain regulated activities associated with a mixed-use residential and commercial development of the subject real property known as 3333 Berlin Turnpike. And Mr. Chairman, if I may, I'll just quickly go through. We have a similar intro, obviously, that we covered with the prior public hearing, but the public hearings are separate unless we incorporate certain segments. So I'll just briefly go through some of the same information that we did at the with the prior public hearing.
Please proceed.
So again, the applicant comprises two different entities. The first is Grossman Development Group. And on behalf of the Grossman Development Group, we have with us this evening Mr. Howard Grossman, who is the president and managing principal. We also have the senior project manager, Mr. Jamie Anderson. On behalf of Criterion Development Partners, we have Jack Englert, who is the executive vice president and principal. From BL Companies, we have Michelle Carlson, who is the director of land development, as well as Dennis Godier, who is the senior project manager, who is handling this particular application. We have our professional soil scientist and professional wetland scientist, Mr. Eric Davison of Davison Environmental LLC. And also with us this evening, we have Mr. Daniel Gorman, who is a licensed environmental professional with Whitestone Associates with offices in Rocky Hill. And just next slide, please. Thank you. Grossman Development is known for its commercial development over the past 4 decades. And we have, again, Mr. Grossman is with us this evening, and he is responsible for management oversight and strategic planning for GDG. And again, has over 40 years of commercial real estate experience and specializes in mixed-use development, retail leasing, and investment sales. And they are involved with sites not only in Massachusetts, but also here in Connecticut, in addition to the one that is the subject of this application. On the residential side of the mixed-use development, we have Criterion Development Partners with offices in Waltham, Mass, and Dallas, Texas. Well, that's where they were founded. Their offices are in Massachusetts. and they have over 70 years of combined experience in developing successful multifamily communities with distinctive living environments, innovative designs, and dedicated services. They've been involved with permitting approximately 5,500 multifamily units, comprising approximately $1.18 billion of total project investment. If I can have the next slide, please. The subject property, again, is 3333 Berlin Turnpike. You can see the locational map on this slide. There's a locational map in the top right-hand corner with the site located in the bottom southerly side of the locational map. On the easterly side of the property, we have the Berlin Turnpike, and in the southerly side, we do have access from Payne Road to the subject property. Now, if I can have the next slide, Mr. Chairman, if we may, Mr. Davison can walk through the same presentation, or if within your discretion in the commission, whatever you desire, if you wanted to incorporate that portion from the prior public hearing, just dealing with the wetlands identification and description, we can do that, have that incorporated, or you can have Mr.
So I will waive that, I will waive that at this time. I can please proceed to your next slide,
So you would like Mr. Davison just to provide a quick summary?
please.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chairman. So with your permission, I'll turn the presentation over to Mr. Davison, and he'll provide a summary of his description of the various wetland resources and watercourse resources associated with property. And then we'll get into, just to provide you with an overview, a specific, we'll turn the presentation over to representatives from the BL companies who will walk through the specific site development relative to the regulated activities that are being requested to be approved this evening as part of this application. As the commission's well aware, the commission's not being asked to approve the actual site development. That's the subject of a separate hearing involving special permits with your Planning and Zoning Commission. But what's involved here this evening are the regulated activities associated with that site development. So having said that, I'll turn it over to Mr. Davison, and then we'll hear from representatives of the BL company that will walk you through more specifically the regulated activities as they're associated with the site development itself. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you.
This is Eric Davison. I'm a registered soil scientist and a certified professional wetland scientist with 22 years of experience practicing in Connecticut. Let me just give you another sort of, I guess, brief review of the wetlands on the site, and I can elaborate as needed. There are 2 wetlands on the site and 2 watercourses. Again, starting in the northeast corner of the site, we have Wetland 1, which flows from an off-site forested and developed area south onto the site. At the southern terminus of Wetland 1, there's a dug ditch and a riprap channel, which conveys all of the flow from Wetland 1 to the west into Watercourse 1. Watercourse 1 flows west into a culvert outlet, a culvert inlet, then flows underground and discharges into Wetland 2. As I had mentioned, Watercourse 1 is a man-made trapezoidal shaped watercourse. It is riprap lined on the top of the bank, the side slopes, and the bottom of the channel. There's very little flow in the watercourse in most days. It's most of the surface water or flow is associated with a storm event. So it does not really have any base flow associated with groundwater. So that's Wetland 1 and Watercourse 1. In the northwest corner of the site, you have Watercourse 2, which originates from a discharge of an off-site detention pond. Again, it is a man-made channelized watercourse which flows onto the site, takes a hard turn to the west, where it flows along the edge of what was a staging area that Eversource used for equipment and training. Flows west along the edge of that field and into a culvert inlet. That culvert runs underneath that old training yard into a discharge point in the northeast corner of Wetland 2. Wetland 2 is a hillside groundwater slope wetland that forms into a perennial watercourse at the southern end. The wetland is mostly forested. Basically your typical red maple, spice bush, skunk cabbage swamp, which is the most common wetland type in Connecticut. There's a small patch of open canopy where the tree canopy is missing or was removed, and that's a Phragmites dominated area. And the wetland flows gently to the south, where it then becomes concentrated flow, flows into a perennial watercourse, and then where it turns along the access drive, at that point, the wetland is narrow and channelized, having been sort of reworked and narrowed and channelized as a result of the installation of that access road. Wetland 2 discharges into a culvert inlet. And so at that point, that's carrying all of the wetland and watercourse flow from the entire site. That southern discharge point at Payne Road, that to the best of our knowledge, the water flows into the municipal system, and somewhere approximately a mile downstream, it daylights into the Webster Brook system. So the overall watershed that the site lies in is Webster Brook. I don't know, Mr. Chairman, just having gone through some of this before, I don't want to be too brief, but I don't want to waste too much of your time. So I don't know if you want me to go through.
If I'm okay, we've seen this. I think I'm willing to proceed beyond, I'll go with your earlier testimony, and I'm willing to step through these slides fairly briskly. Obviously, these are photos.
Perhaps I could jump ahead to the photos, and this would answer, I'm sorry, I don't remember the chairman, the commissioner's name, but it was a great question. Just trying to relate the photos to where there are wetland activities. I can do that quickly if you want me to.
Please.
Let me just scroll back to the, okay. So essentially all of the wetland impact areas are in the water courses. There's really, the only wetland impacts are associated with just modifying the stormwater outlets. So the bulk of the impacts are really associated with the water courses. So, and this is a major location here. This photo shows water course 1. This is at this point west of wetland 1. And as you can see, it's sort of tough to tell, but for those of you that went out on the site, it was probably pretty clear to you that this is just again, a big constructed drainage ditch. You can see the riprap on the far slope, the riprap on the base of the channel, and the riprap in the foreground on the slope closest to where I'm taking the photo. There's a lot of vegetation that's grown in, but you can see it's just a constructed channel. You can see there's no flow in it at this point. In this section of the watercourse, I never saw any flow in it. I'm assuming it takes a big storm for the flow to get to this point. So it's really just, the function of this watercourse is simply just flow conveyance. It doesn't really have any other wetland functions. It's simply just a watercourse that conveys flow. This whole segment will be filled in. So this watercourse is in the impact zone, this segment of the watercourse that you see here. And this is a photo that's looking to the west towards the culvert inlet. So this section will be impacted. If you want to go to...
But just to be clear,
yeah.
Mr. Davison, however, the conduit will be beneath the ground. Obviously, we're going to cover it over, but the actual hydrology between there, if there's a very heavy storm, the water will be flowing underneath the parking lot over to the west.
Correct. And I'm
meeting
sure
up with that other water course from what that's off the property.
Yeah, I was going to bring that up too, that when he said buried, that might have been confusing. It's going to be, when he said filled in, it's going to be buried, but it's still going to be there.
Yes. So yeah. And I'll let the engineer, let me just give you the orientation, but obviously the engineers can describe the flow conveyance features and stormwater features. But yes, sorry, poor choice of words. Yes, it will be piped. The water course will then be piped as opposed to open. This is just this photo is just showing the origin of watercourse 1 at the southern base of wetland 1. This is about the start of the limits of disturbance. This is about where the limits of disturbance begin. This is just at the southern edge of wetland 1, right where the watercourse starts. That riprap that you see in the photo, that is the far slope or the northern slope of watercourse 1. And then if you want to show, if you guys want to flip ahead to watercourse 2, keep going. You keep going. Yeah, okay, so this is watercourse 2. So this is another section that will be impacted. This is the watercourse again that flows from the offsite detention pond. It flows onto the site where it elbows and turns to the west. At that point, that's where the parking is going to end. So the parking will cover this watercourse, and again, it will be piped. This watercourse is already piped, so it'll basically just be extending the piping another, well, I'll let the engineers weigh in, but it's basically just a short extension of the piping to accommodate sort of the northern end of what's going to be parking. But this is the other channel that will be filled in. Again, this is not a wetland, it's simply just a watercourse. It's just a flow conveyance feature. You can see that, it doesn't, it's got riprap in it, it's got manipulated earth, it's mostly invasive species. There's no real significance or function to it other than just carrying flow into a pipe. So those are the photos that show the two areas that will have direct impact. The other photos that I showed of this wetland here, wetland 2, these are all areas that are outside of any direct impact. So hopefully that answers the question that the other commissioner had asked about photos relative to impact areas. Those are the only areas that will be directly affected.
Yes, it did answer my question. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
I have a question. That open area on the left-hand side where the stormwater management area is going to be, is that location where that's going to be? That open area, maybe it's a question, but yeah, that area there, correct. I assume that's the area where there's going to be the stormwater management area on the plan?
Correct.
That is correct?
Yeah, that's an open field now. That was one of the Eversource sort of equipment staging areas and training areas for their arborists when I originally flagged the site. So that's an open area that's already been disturbed and manipulated. Right. There's some gravel and there's some grass, and it's an open field.
Looks like there's some kind of I'm sorry, Mr. Chairman. Well, didn't mean to interrupt you. It looks like there's some kind of a swale or a little detention basin there now. Is that correct?
No, those are just mowed trails. They're like mowed lines in there. I think what you're seeing is some fencing around the outside.
No, I stood on the road there and looked in, and it looked like it was depressed in a depressed area there. So I thought it was intentional, but maybe it's just the appearance of it.
Yeah, there's no stormwater feature there now. No.
Okay.
So you did mention in the earlier public hearing, there's this isolated forest there. There are some very mature trees. Are they going to be disturbed when they construct that stormwater area management? Is that going to be disturbed in any way?
Yeah, Dennis, do you have a site plan that shows the clearing limits relative to that area?
For the record, Dennis Godair with BL Companies. Mr. Chairman, at this point, we were ready and prepared to begin our presentation about the site plan and the impacts in the regulated areas. So if you may, I'll continue with that portion, and I think that'll answer some of your questions.
Okay.
Yep.
Unless, is there anything that Mr. Davison wanted to say? Is there anything else that you wanted to convey to the commission before we do that?
I don't believe so. If some other questions come up in the interim, I can answer them.
Thank you.
I did have one question, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Bashan.
Relevant to the whole northern part of the site where the disturbance, where the construction activities are going to be. Is this based on the in the upland review area? Is this based on the presumed new flaggings or the new map, or is this the existing?
For the record, Dennis Goodyear again from BL Companies. The disturbances that we have outlined as regulated activities are based upon the new delineation by Mr. Erickson and picked up by our survey team from BL Companies.
So assuming the amendment then.
Correct.
And then also, and this is a technical question, I guess, but when a water course, these water courses will be buried in conduit, are they still considered a water course? And if not, does that change the review area there? If anyone knows the answer to that one.
That's a good question.
Sorry, Michelle, go ahead.
No, Michelle Carlson, for the record, licensed professional engineer, state of Connecticut with BL Companies in Meriden, Connecticut. You know, that's a good question that I don't know the answer to. Because we're getting right now, you're accepting Eric's delineation, okay, out of the wetlands. So we're accepting the delineation. So what we show on the drawings is the delineation as it is in the field. As part of this application, we're asking you for permission to fill some of those wetlands, okay? So
To put them conduit, put them in.
correct. So you're giving us permission to fill that water course as part of this application.
But I think, Ms. Carlson, I think the question is, if you look at the map, that is still on there. It is flagged, from 125 over to 149. If you look, yeah, right.
Correct.
That is on the map. So that is, even though it's an underground water course, can it still be a water course? I guess that's the question.
Yeah.
I mean, part of it, Eric, is piped, right? I mean, there's pieces of this water course that were already previously piped on the site as part of Eversource.
I think Eric, Chris Smith, for the record, Eric, maybe, I think the question is whether this will remain a water course.
Yeah, I can answer that question.
And Eric, I think, can respond to that.
Yeah, again, it's Eric Davison. Yeah, so a piped water course would not be classified as a water course because it would no longer meet the statutory definition because based on state statute, it has to have a defined channel and bank, and it has to have 2 of 3 criteria. Those 3 criteria are wetland vegetation, flow longer than the duration of a storm event, and scour and detritus. So the defining feature is the fact that it's an open channel because it has a defined channel and bank. So, piped water courses are not flagged in the field by soil scientists, but obviously, any kind of development on a site where you have a piped water course, the engineers obviously accommodate that flow and have to manage that, but it's not something you would field delineate, if that makes sense.
Yep, makes sense.
I have a question, Commissioner Santa.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just weighing in on this discussion. I was thinking of the Park River. That's an underground channelized water course. And it's still considered a water course, even though it at its terminus has been completely moved underground. So I'm thinking that could still be designated as a water course, even though it's underground.
Yeah, I think, again, it's Eric Davison. I think we're just sort of, into some semantics here. It of course is still a water course. It just becomes something that an engineer
it's not a regulated
maps and manages as opposed to a soil scientist. That's all.
But it's not a regulated water course anymore. If I gathered what you were saying correctly.
Yeah. Is it still regulated?
Because in other words, then does that change? Yeah. And does that change your upland review area for what you're asking for this construction activity? I would suggest it does change it and takes a lot of that activity out of the regulated area. Like, let's say we gave you permission just to put the water in the pipe underground, then this other activity you came afterwards, it wouldn't be in a regulated area anymore.
Yeah,
Mr. Hinckley. Mr. Hinckley wishes to speak. Go.
I can just say from past practice, this has come up before in the town, and this has happened. And basically, they've redefined the water course, and that's going to be your new wetland. Correct. It is going to be piped and underground. In 10 years, another soil scientist comes through, and there may not be a wetland there, but currently there's going to be a wetland. There really isn't much to regulate because we know they're not really going to do much in that area. but this has happened in the past. And, you know, it's common practice. They don't really necessarily just make the wetland completely go away in most cases. That's all.
So, Mr. Hinckley, so how
I
is
was
this
specific-
categorized? Excuse me.
Just wanted to say I was specific to the water courses, not the wetlands.
Correct. The water courses, yes.
So, Mr. Hinckley, question.
Yes.
So we're going to have our maps revised. If this amendment, if it's approved,
Mm-hmm.
what will be shown on the map itself of the town of Newington?
What they're showing you right now, their blue line, that their new amended line, that's what's going to be on the map. And it, you know, that will be the regulated area. Because
Okay,
that's
so
what,
even the area above the piping in that area is going to be a
Correct.
parking
Yep.
lot. That will be a regulated area.
correct. It happened on Strawberry Lane
Happens all the
area as well.
time. We got whole streets sitting in the regulated area sometimes.
Correct.
Okay.
Yes, that was for clarification.
All right. Moving on. I think right now we're ready for Mr. Gadere's presentation. If there's no further questions at this time.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. For the record, Dennis Godere with BL Company's Senior Project Manager. I'm a licensed landscape architect. I'm here in the state of Connecticut. I'm also a planner certified by the American Institute of Certified Planners. The slide that is before you, I just want to just talk a little bit about the history of the site, and that it had been obviously previously developed as an Eversource facility for trading and warehousing. Here you can see is in roughly 2016. I'm showing the existing building or the prior buildings that were in place, and then the staging area, some of the trading grounds for their arborists and other staff, and then parking areas as well. At the time, just over a half of the property was considered basically impervious. A fair amount was also not just paved or building, but was gravel, which is very comparable to being an asphalt pavement as well, especially after it has been compacted with vehicle movements. After demolition, majority of the site had remained, so just below half, so 42% had been remains today as being nearly impervious with the buildings removed. So as you know, and as you are aware, it is a highly disturbed site. I'm going to just provide a brief overview of the project itself, and then I'll turn it over to Ms. Carlson to talk in more detail about the stormwater management and other technical aspects. So we are, as was previously mentioned by Attorney Smith, the site is roughly just about 25 acres. 13 acres is proposed to be subdivided to accommodate a residential development here on the western half of the property and a commercial development on the eastern side of the property. So it's roughly 13 acres and 11 acres to accommodate the two developments. It's 269 residential units and just under 80,000 square feet of commercial space. And you can see it's a mix of different types of retail, commercial, with a supermarket as the anchor. Stormwater management is located in this location, which is at an above grade. There's some below grade subsurface, which Ms. Carlson will talk about a little bit more in a moment. And then you can see supporting the development is parking to meet the requirements of the zoning. And I know that the zoning isn't your area of regulatory, but it has an impact on the overall site layout. For the proposed development, we have 415 parking spaces in support of the commercial, and there is, my apologies here, there's 538 parking spaces in support of the residential, and that is based upon the requirements of the zoning. And just to put a little context of the overall footprint, You can see this is, there's a landscape requirement within parking for residential. 10% of the parking areas need to be landscaped, which is shown in green, which is great from an aesthetic standpoint and from an environmental standpoint, because it provides that green space and a canopy and areas for stormwater management. And then commercial, because we are over a specific threshold, 15% is required to be landscaped as well. Again, a combination of green space and landscape for plantings. At the heart of our discussion and our request is the regulated activities. This map has a lot of different colors on it. I'll summarize them. So you can see the wetland limits. You can see the little dots which show the flagged locations of each of the 3 wetland locations that Mr. Davison had previously mentioned. The upland review area is shown in the bold or the dashed line. And then the different color codes shows the activity. So the green is basically a landscaped area within 100 feet. The reds are direct impacts to wetlands. For instance, this location has to do with improving the stormwater discharge point for the existing confluence of the watercourses that Mr. Davison had discussed earlier because of erosion. And again, Ms. Carlson will discuss that a little bit more in a moment. There are some buildings that are within upland review areas as well. And this is the full length of wetland disturbance, direct wetland impacts for a watercourse. And this would be piped underground, as well as picking up the flows for this wetland and then discharged down into this location. And in total, the activities that we are requesting, while they're all itemized in detail down here, we are asking for approval from the commission for 4,977 square feet of direct impact to the wetlands. And then within the upland review area, there is 5.8 acres, which equals 253,014 square feet. Just to put that in context, the disturbed area that currently exists within the upland review areas now is 257,000 square feet. So there's 4,000 square feet more of impacts in the upland review area than has been previously disturbed based upon survey work and reconnaissance on our part. And you can see here in the next slide, this purple line shows the area that has been disturbed previously from past development. And then this is the location of the building that had been demolished, the primary building.
Mr. Padilla? I have questions. A few.
Yes.
So as far as the site itself, is the wetlands going to be impacted by like receptacles? I mean, when you have a housing area, that there be people who have to dispose of their day-to-day, is that going to be impacted by the wetland? Also, I'm concerned about snow removal. Is that stormwater area going to be vulnerable when you have to push the snow out of the way? And how has that been? The wetlands will be no way impacted by those activities once the site is functional.
Yes, the refuse area. So this is one location for a refuse location that services the residential. There's another refuse location here, and then over here that services the retail and commercial. There is a operations and management plan that we have submitted that would require routine reviews and litter removal and pickup and inspections to ensure that that the areas of refuse are enclosed or maintained. If there's any debris that does in fact get blown in or find their way into the wetlands, they would be picked up as well. Snow removal, there has been areas such as there's this triangular location here. Some of these larger areas would also have locations for snow storage. They would find them, some of the runoff would find its way into the stormwater system, which would then have some level of treatment, which Ms. Carlson can speak about momentarily.
Okay. Did have a question about the plantings adjacent to the wetlands. Who can tell about what's the plantings you're going through in your model there, as far as hopefully no invasives of any kind, or
No, you read my mind. That was one of the slides that I was getting ready to present. We are proposing, to the best of our ability, to remove any of the invasives that are there. We certainly would like to achieve removal of all of them. But then we would look to enhance the buffer area outside of the wetlands with new plantings. It hasn't been established as to really how many. It would be more on I'll say case by case, or field conditions as the development gets finalized, but native species such as red maples, cedar, winterberry, and dogwood, to name a few of them. But there would be a native. We would not be proposing by any imagination any types of invasive species to be introduced. That would not be our in our proposal.
thank you.
If I may, Mr. Chairman.
Commissioner Bashant.
And to answer the question I believe the chairman raised about those most mature trees that we saw the pictures of, they will not be disturbed, I gather, by looking at this image here. Or will they be disturbed and then replanted with the trees that you're showing?
In this location, the only area of wetlands that would be disturbed is right up in here, which is already disturbed from riprap and discharge from the existing stormwater conduits that discharge at this point. All of the other mature vegetation within the wetlands would not be disturbed.
So there's no activity in there at all, basically?
No.
Okay, thank you.
Commissioner Wagner, I have a question.
Commissioner Wagner.
Is the parking lots going to have storm drain, and where's that storm water going to run off to?
That is a great segue to the next part of our presentation. If you wouldn't mind, we could certainly continue. And Ms. Carlson can give an overview of our stormwater management plan.
Beautiful. Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Michelle Carlson. I'm a licensed professional engineer in the state of Connecticut. I'm the director of land development at BL Companies, and I'll walk you through the stormwater system. First of all, the existing system, there's no water quality treatment. There's no controls in place. So the system that we're proposing is going to implement some controls to treat water quality, flow, and volume. The system's designed in conformance with the 2004 Connecticut Deep Stormwater Manual, the 2000 Town of Newington Drainage Manual, and we've reduced flows through the 1, 2, 5, 10, 25, 50, and 100-year storms. I should say the rate of runoff. There's a reduction in the rate of runoff at each of our discharge points over what's going there now, and it's designed in accordance with all of the standards. What we're gonna do is there's the different colors here, so you can see where we're collecting stormwater and where it's going. So we'll start from the east side by the Berlin Turnpike in the navy blue. The navy blue piping is collecting roof water from that first commercial building out front and the catch basins in the parking lot. And the catch basins, we're proposing deep sump catch basins with hoods. So the hoods will help trap any of the floatables that might get into the system. And what's going to happen is these blue lines, they will tie into the underground system. Dennis, are you driving this? Yeah, right there. Go to the blue underground system. That's an underground Coltech system, and we're going to collect the stormwater there. Prior to going into the underground Coltech system, the water will go through a hydrodynamic separator, and the hydrodynamic separator is sized to treat the water quality flow as required per the manual. The pink area is collecting from the rest of the commercial development, and that all will go through that underground system. prior to reaching the underground system, this stormwater will be collected and will also go through a hydrodynamic separator to treat the water quality flow. So that's how the commercial area is being collected. And then the blue and the pink will merge and they'll go through the green dashed line to the discharge point into a riprap level spreader that's sized to reduce any scour, and it's sized accordingly. And from that point, it then runs in the open channel that's there along the access road and into the 56-inch corrugated pipe, and then into Payne Road. So at that point, along the access road where we discharge the stormwater, there's no increase in rate of runoff through any of the storm events that we've analyzed. On the residential side, let's start with the red pipe. Let's go to that wetland, that water course. We're basically piping the water course through the black and red pipe. Right there, that black and red pipe is what's taking the water course and piping it. We're collecting, Dennis, look at the section up in the north where we have the head wall where we're connecting the stormwater that's running in right there. That's going to get connected into this main pipe, and that's conveying this water course that we're essentially burying. And then the red line up above is basically an under drain because we're cutting into this hillside. So we're putting an under drain there so that we capture any water, any groundwater that, seasonal high that could get in there, or just any runoff, and we're going to capture it in that pipe, and then it's going to tie into the red and black conveyance pipe, and that'll be routed into the wetland 2 system. And then the brown and yellow, the brown system essentially is collecting from part of the residential and going into the underground area there. Prior to going into the underground, there's a hydrodynamic separator to treat the water quality volume. And then the yellow is going to go through a hydrodynamic separator, treat the water quality volume, remove any floatables that somehow might get through these catch basin hooded covers. And we're not, and that's going directly into the stormwater pond. Okay, there's no underground there. We're putting that into the stormwater pond, and then that will discharge into wetland 2. And we're trying to mimic kind of the existing conditions and where the wetland is getting water now, so that we're not starving any part of the wetland. And essentially wetland 2, it all slopes down to that 56-inch pipe along the access road. That wetland is sloping toward that point, and that's the main point of discharge from this site. So, it also, Dennis, in the landscape areas, there are some rain gardens that we're going to put in there. We didn't account for any infiltration because the soils are very poor here. So we're not getting any infiltration here, unfortunately. So it's not like we can take some of the roofs offline and put them into an underground system and infiltrate. The soils they don't work. And that's why we're capturing it in the stream with the catch basins. And that's essentially how we're going to operate the storm system. Do you have any questions?
Yes, Commissioner Paskowitz here.
Go ahead, please.
The overall design that you put together in the layout and the piping, what year did you use to produce and fabricate this design based on, stormwater changes over time from climate, but narrowing it down to municipal stormwater planning? There's 25-year, 50-year, 100-year. Which did you use?
We designed it per the Newington Drainage Manual, which is for the 10-year storm to flow just full and not surcharge. So it's designed in accordance with the per year drainage manual for the 10-year storm.
Fine, thank you.
And then obviously the underground systems, the
Yes.
detention systems, 100-year event.
Ah,
I have a question. So that storm water management area, how many, I see a pipe, the yellow dash diagonal line going, there's a riprap and into the wetland. Is there anything in that stormwater it's just basically a ditch basically with a pipe? How does that work when the water from the yellow comes down in there and then coming across there into the wetland there.
There's an outlet structure. If you look, right there is an outlet structure. So basically it meters the water out of that pond. So there'll be different orifices, different diameter circles in that outlet structure. And as the water rises, it goes out the different outlets. So it's metered out so that the flow's not just rushing right through. So it gets detained and then it slowly meters itself out.
Commissioner Casasanta?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just a question on the commercial drainage. Where is that water draining to now? Because I have trouble believing that that area of the parcel is draining into that southwest corner wetland. So it looks like you're adding a lot of water that wouldn't normally end up in that wetland to that wetland.
No, a majority of it does, the property slopes kind of north to south and east to west. If you look at the grades, it's sloping down toward that pond.
But I was thinking that even before it would get there, it might be picked up by other existing storm sewers or drainage systems. I just wanted to be sure that we weren't adding water to that wetland.
No.
Which I would imagine if there's going to be a problem, that would be a good problem. But too much of a good thing can be bad.
Yeah, no, we are not increasing the rate of the flow. So there's nothing that's gonna come surging down into these outlets and cause erosion. We are decreasing the rate.
Michelle, maybe you could speak to existing drainage on that area near the building, what was there and where it went, if you know.
Sure, it basically went, Eric, to the middle of the pond. You can't see on the blue here. Yeah, it would go to there, and then there was another part, Dennis, that went right almost into the middle of the pond. Let me pull up the drawing, it might be easier.
There's an 8-inch pipe that discharges over in this location.
Correct.
That was my memory, is they did have a
Right.
system down that existing driveway you can see on the aerial that
Correct.
went that way. So I think that might answer Commissioner Casasanta's questions, because the water did flow. They did have an existing drainage system.
Yeah, and for the record, again, Dennis Godere, BL Companies, even though the building had been demolished, all of the infrastructure is still in place. There's drainage structures here and conduit that's piping, all the runoff currently discharging into this point or over to this point over here.
Thank you.
So that stormwater management area, is there gonna be plantings in there, or is this gonna be an open pond where the ducks are gonna be? If I'm trying to envision this area, is that the way that area is gonna look like when we're done?
It's to drain dry. I mean, the intent is that, we want it to drain dry. It's not designed to be a permanent pond.
All right, are you gonna have some plantings in there? Obviously, with this wind blowing and, something's gonna catch in there at some point, right? Especially invasives.
Dennis, did you want to go over the plantings in the bottom there?
Yeah, no, as of now, there's a conservation mix from a seed mix that we had been proposing. We can certainly, that's part of what's in the buffer plantings. We can certainly enhance that with some of the native species that would be tolerant of wet and dry conditions, certainly.
Yeah, it's not going to be a mud hole if that's what you're concerned about. No, it won't.
Right.
That's a no. That won't happen.
Okay. All
But
right.
that would not be a welcoming view for the residential.
Okay. So relative to the wetland and the water that goes into the wetland hydrology, what type of maintenance is involved yearly, or what's planned to, obviously things get awry, things get clogged or sediment, and how does that work out that the hydrology may be impeded?
Well, we have the O&M, that was submitted as part of the documents, and we have, there'll be annual maintenance of the hydrodynamic separators. In the first year, you usually check the structures twice as much as you will in the subsequent years to get a handle on how much sediment is going in there. But the hydrodynamic separators, it's annual maintenance, regular sweeping as needed, trash pickup, quarterly checking of the catch basin sumps. And so there will be a regular maintenance program for the site.
Mr. Hinckley, is that covered by the blueprint, or what's the governing document there, just for my interest?
There was an actual written document that Dennis submitted. I can review the actual.
That is correct, and I believe they're also going to add some notes about a maintenance schedule or plan
Correct.
on one of the sheets as well in the plan set.
Correct.
That was a comment that's already been made to them, and they're aware of it. So,
Okay. Mr. Hinckley, is there anyone on the phone, on the line from the public? This is a public hearing.
correct. There are 4 attendees. At the moment, I do not see anyone with their hand up. So I don't see anything. If you guys want to move on and then check back in with them later.
Yeah, any other comments from commissioners?
I had a question,
Commissioner Bashant?
Sean. And it's been already answered, I guess, but that retention or the stormwater management area, this is going to be a detention pond as opposed to a retention pond. In other words, you
Correct.
said it's going to drain out.
Yes, Michelle Carlson for the record. Yes, correct. It's designed to drain. It's not retention, it's detention. So
And
it
is
will
the-
drain out.
Is there any reason or benefit one way or the other? I'm just curious because a lot of the ponds we see hold water are designed to hold water, and this one we want it to drain out.
Well, it's funny because there's different schools of thought, right? Some areas don't want them now because they breed mosquitoes. So they want them to dry, they want them to drain dry so you don't have mosquitoes.
Hmm.
And when they drain dry and they're maintained and there's nice, wetland conservation mix, they look pretty like that. And it's better than a pond that's breeding mosquitoes.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, you can look it up. I worked on the Stu Leonard site, those ponds are,
A lot of water.
yeah, it's just, I don't like those.
Okay,
And
thank
there's
you.
also, there's also going to be walking trails next to this pond. So we just, we want it to work how it's supposed to work, drain dry, and just be a nice amenity.
Is that what we're seeing there in the plan? Is that a sidewalk that we actually see there?
It's going to be a walk. It's not paved.
Okay, it almost looks like concrete in the plan.
That's not concrete, is it, Dennis?
The symbol might look like concrete, but the intent would be that it likely be stone dust.
Yeah, that's what I thought.
Natural path.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions from commissioners? I don't see any hands up.
See nothing from any of the attendees.
Any questions for Ms. Conway? Is Ms. Conway and Mr. Commissioner Ancona, any comments?
I have nothing. Thank you.
All right, one last check of the from the public.
Nothing that I see.
All right, and at this time, I will thank the applicants and the
Oh,
presenters. for their-
Mr. Chairman, if I may, if I
Commissioner
If I may,
Smith.
Mr. Chairman, we do have some slides that just summarize the ENS controls, but if
Right.
you're satisfied with that, that is part of the application. I don't know if you'd like us to go through those, and then at the
Please.
closing, I just have a few, two questions for our 3 experts before we close out with your
Please
permission,
proceed,
Mr. Chairman.
Attorney Smith. Please proceed.
Okay. Good evening, Michelle Carlson again with BL Companies. We have a phased approach to the erosion sedimentation control. The site basically will be balanced. We're going to have to move earth around, but the goal is to limit any hauling off of soil and to keep to have it be a balanced site. And so what we've done is in the beginning we'll put 2 anti-tracking construction entrances, one on the Berlin Turnpike and one down on Payne Road. And then what we've done is the green are temporary diversion swales. You know, as we're grading the site, we will direct runoff toward those swales and then to the temporary sediment traps. And these are designed in accordance with the town regulations and the 2002 Connecticut soil and sediment and erosion control guidelines. We'll have silt fence all around the limited of disturbed areas downstream to make sure that no sediment runs off the site. In the sediment traps, we will put what's called a fair cloth skimmer. So if water does get into those sediment traps, what happens is the water runs through the fair cloth skimmer and it skims the sediment, and clean water goes through and then exits out of the sediment trap. And that's the first phase. And also in the diversion swales, we have to put stone check dams so we can slow down any storm water that might get into them and run off. And we also have shown some in the gold color, some stockpile areas that will ring with silt fence. And then as we start to put catch basins in, or before catch basins are pulled out, if there's existing ones there, we will protect them with silt sacks or hay bales and silt fence. So we'll make sure that all the existing structures are protected before we start grading. And then obviously they'll be taken out as we go along. So that's the first phase. Then there's a second phase. You can see now that we've started to get the retail set in, and we're putting erosion control blanket down to stabilize slopes. We still have our stone check dams and diversion swales running to trap 5 and trap 4, and we're showing some stockpile areas. And then the next phase, we've worked into the residential area and we've added more erosion control blanket on the north side and down around the detention basin, and we're stabilizing the site. So that's it from a high level.
Mr. Chairman, in our little conclusion and summary, just to cover all the bases for the commission, I do have a quick question for our 3 experts, if I may. And Mr. Davison, and I'm asking Mr. Davison as a professional soil scientist, professional wetland scientist, and Ms. Carlson as a licensed professional engineer, and Mr. Godier as a professional landscape architect. If in your professional opinions and your expertise, if the regulated activities associated with this application satisfy the factors for consideration provided by Section 22A41 of the Connecticut General Statutes, as well as Section 10 of the regulations of the Conservation Commission of the town of Newington. And if you could just respond to that and identify yourself, that would be great. Thank you. So maybe Mr. Davison first.
Yeah. Hi, Eric Davison. Yes, it does, Chris, and also just specifically to the wetland delineation methodology, it complies with everything in Section 22A regarding wetland delineation and water course determinations.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Carlson?
Yes, I agree that it satisfies both sections as designed.
Thank you. And Mr. Godier?
Dennis Godier for the record. Yes, I concur.
Okay, thank you. And thank you, Mr. Chairman. And in conclusion, we respectfully submit that the application does satisfy the statutory and your regulatory criteria, and we would respectfully request that the commission consider acting favorably upon the application. And thank you for your time. You may have some other questions after you heard about the ENS controls, but that does conclude our presentation. And again, thank you on behalf of the team and the applicant in particular.
Okay. Thank you, sir. Thank you to the team, for your team. Very well presentation. I'm impressed. Thank you. Mr. Hinckley, is there anyone on the phone? Again, one last check on the public.
I do not see anybody with their hand up.
Are there any final questions from the commissioners? I'm seeing none. In that case, may I have a motion close the public hearing for application 2021-11.
I make a
Commissioner
motion.
Casasanta.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I make a motion that we close the public hearing for this application.
I'll second it. John Bashan.
Second by Commissioner Bashant. Shall we call the roll, please, Ms. Gibbons?
Yes, Commissioner Ancona,
Yes.
Commissioner Bashand,
Yes.
Commissioner Casasanta,
Yes.
Commissioner Conway,
Yes.
Commissioner Paskowitz, Chairman Saydil,
I'm a yes.
Commissioner Wagner,
Yes.
Commissioner Paskowitz.
Yes.
7 yes.
All right, thank you. Moving on to old business, section 4. Application 2021-09, map amendment for the inland wetlands watercourse commission map amendment on 3333 Berlin Turnpike. Applicant HJG-PC Newington Investor LLC. Owner, the Rocky Road Realty Company. Agent contact BL Companies. Is there any questions from the commission regarding the map amendment as presented? I'm seeing none. Okay, then Commissioner Wagner may have a motion for the map amendment of property at 3333 Berlin Turnpike. Owner, the Rocky Road Realty Company. Applicant, HJGPC Newington Investor LLC. Contact Dennis Gadare. Means you submit a motion.
Yes, I submit a motion that the permit 2021-9 MA for wetland maps amendment be approved based on the evidence received and reviewed at the public hearing of May 11th, 2021. Effective date of wetland map amendment will be May 18th, 2021.
Thank you. May I have a second?
Second by Commissioner Paskowitz.
Seconded by Commissioner Paskowitz. Final discussion? Ms. Gibbons, please call the roll.
Commissioner Ancona,
Yes.
Commissioner Bashand,
Yes.
Commissioner Casasanta,
Aye.
Commissioner Conway,
Yes.
Commissioner Paskowitz,
Yes.
Chairman Saydil,
Yes.
Commissioner Wagner.
Yes.
7 yes.
Okay. So moving on to old business section B, application 2021-11 for construction activities in the inland wetland and watercourse regulated area at 3333 Berlin Turnpike. Applicant HJGPC Newington Investor LLC. Owner, the Rocky Road Realty Company. Agent contact BL Companies. My question for the commission, based on the testimony you've heard this evening, do you feel we can vote on this application this evening? What is the consensus of the commission?
I'm
I
comfortable.
Commissioner
I'm
Wagner, I'm comfortable.
I'm comfortable too, John Bashan.
Thank you.
Comfortable.
Commissioner Ancona, Commissioner Paskowitz,
I'm fine with it and its completion. Thank you.
Commissioner Conway.
Yes, I'm comfortable moving on.
All right. So, Mr. Hinckley, is the application complete?
The application is complete, yes.
So I believe we have the standard conditions, just the standard conditions, there's nothing outstanding on, is the standard 10 conditions then?
That's what I placed before you. If there are any other conditions you feel that need to be addressed, we can discuss them or add them. We discussed the maintenance plan. You know, that's already basically been addressed in their O&M plan, and they're gonna attach something to some type of schedule to the final Mylars as well for that, if that was a concern.
Last final comments from commissioners on the conditions are, we're gonna have our standard 10 conditions. And there's no other amendments, I feel, at this time to add.
I don't have anything to add. I would just say that I'm fairly comfortable with the plan as proposed, and I like the fact that the southwestern portion, the wooded area and the buffer is being protected, and there's no construction activity except for the parking lot and one small garage in there. The northern boundary, again, we discussed it, it's, it's a channelized water course now, so, in fairness, I think that a lot of those, the request is more than, they're asking for more than what we should, I don't know how to put it. They shouldn't even have to ask for that, in my opinion, once that pipe is buried. So that's what I'm getting at, because it's not a wetland anymore.
Thank you, Commissioner Bashan. Any other comments from commissioners?
Commissioner Pasquich here.
Commissioner
I
Pasquich,
can-
please proceed.
Yeah, I concur with Commissioner Bashan. And I'd like to add that I feel that the property as is now going to be suited to a better use and be more of a viable use for residents in Newington. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else?
Commissioner Ancona here.
Please, Commissioner Ancona.
Yeah, I think the fact that the property was already changed, the wetland was already changed a long time ago, is a good factor, another pro factor to building this.
Okay, thank you. Anyone else but care to comment before we proceed? Seeing none. Commissioner Wagner, may I have a motion to accept the application 2021-11 for construction activities within the regulated area on the property at 3333 Berlin Turnpike. Owner, the Rocky Road Realty Company, applicant HJG-PC, Newington Investor LLC, contact Dennis Gadare.
Yes, a motion to permit 2021-11 for construction activities within the regulated wetland area be approved based on evidence received and reviewed of the public hearing of May 11th, 2021, with 10 standard conditions in addition to any other conditions the commission may oppose at the meeting.
Okay, there's no no other conditions that has been recorded. May I have a second?
I'll second it, John Bashan.
Seconding by Commissioner Bashan. Ms. Gibbons, please call the roll.
Commissioner Ancona,
Yes.
Commissioner Bashan,
Yes.
Commissioner Casasanta,
Yes.
Commissioner Conway, Commissioner Paskowitz,
Yes.
Chairman Saydel,
Yes.
Commissioner Wagner,
Yes.
Commissioner Conway.
Yes.
Thank you. 7 yes.
All right, thank you.
Thank you very
Motion
much.
passes.
Thank you very much.
Good luck to you all.
Safe. Thank you.
Have a good night.
Good night.
All right. May I have a motion to adjourn?
Oh, we don't go through the other regular things since this was a special meeting.
That's
That is
correct. We'll do that
correct.
next week.
Yeah, we'll do that. Yes, we'll do it on Tuesday when I see you again, John.
Okay. All right, I'll make the motion to adjourn.
Moved by Commissioner Bashan,
I second it, Wagner, Commissioner Wagner.
seconded by Commissioner Wagner. All in favor?
Aye.
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 Have a good night.
Have a good
Good
night.
night, everyone.
See you next week.
See you next week.
Thank
Two.
you all.
Yes.
Night.
Good night, Renata.
Night.
Good night.
Good night.